Regardless of weather time, by Blueseabird2. Summary. Shota gets sent back in time and immediately starts putting things into place to take down Alpha. More importantly, he also adopts a lot of children, meets friends at the park, and joins Midoriya Inko on her crusade against society's idiocy. He gets Nezu involved. He's also not alone, as he thinks. Chapter 1. Home again. Shota woke up from his nap with a jolt sharper than a requiem. In the moments after his eyes caught on the ceiling panels above him, he was immediately aware of several things. First, he was in the staff room at UA, and had been sleeping on the expulsion paperwork for his entire class. Second, a room full of professional heroes trying to teach was not somewhere he could hide. The fact that every single muscle in his body had tensed to the breaking point. Even if he had yet to make a single sound. Third, and most important, the room also included Hisashi and Amuri, who would not let professional courtesy stop them from asking if Shota was alright, because they were his friends, not professional colleagues. Damn it, Shota. Fourth, or perhaps three, a Hisashi in particular, could not under any circumstances be allowed to talk to Shota right now. Shota stood, paperwork falling off the desk, haphazardly. Sound went distinctly funny the moment the pages hit the floor, and the noise of Namori talking was night, as the man was drinking coffee, stretched and warped with the ease of too long practice. Shota ignored the matter. Shota ignored the muted volume of the road and eyed the distance to the door. The path around the yellow and black blur that was Hisashi, whom Shota wasn't looking at, and Cementos, who just entered the room with power loader at his back. Shota's chances weren't good, and if he waited much longer, then Hisashi would be close enough that Shota would have to look. Might even meet his oldest friend's gaze, and that would break him again. Shota threw himself out the window. He stumbled a bit as muscle memory didn't respond quite as he'd expected, and his capture weapon had an almost unfamiliar kink in it. But his momentum was more than enough to get him seated in the windowsill, on the level above the staff room. He didn't sit long. A yellow line of what could only be Hisashi's hair poked out the window. It probably wasn't a good thing that Shota couldn't hear his friend scream, despite being able to feel its vibration through the glass. It was smoother this time, as he used the window ledges and a convenient flagpole to lurch up another 3 stories. Sound rushed back with Shota's knock on the glass, and the sudden physical awareness of Hisashi's skill. And the day-to-day noises of a hero school slamming into him hard enough that his next knock had a more staccato beat. Nezu opened the windows casually, only lifting a brow when Shota lurched inside, managing not to fall by dint of habits long ingrained in a man who preferred rooftops to sidewalks. Shota ignored his boss and staggered into the corner of the room to sit on a small purple couch, that sat across from a black armchair, beside a chessboard. Somehow, this corner was almost always overlooked by visitors to Nezu's office, and Shota hoped it would give him an extra moment of peace in case he'd been outside longer than he'd thought, and Hizashi and Namari burst through the door. Except they wouldn't. Shota ran from people, not towards people, and Nezu counted as people. Worse, Nezu counted as authority. No one, especially his friends, would expect Shota to come here. I'm going to have a breakdown on your couch. Nezu lowered his teacup, dark eyes dissecting Shota's movements, as the creature leaned back in his office chair. Shota ran one hand through his hair, then lowered it to stare at the tremble that was working its way through his hair. It's going to be bad, and I need you not to let Hizashi or Namari or anyone else find me while I do. You seem rather sure I'll do such a thing, Aizawa-san. Shota opened his mouth, ready to comment on the fact that Shota had always made Nezu curious. Even this swear back. But was with his hatred of the spotlight and ruthless tendencies, with addition Shota's really very odd behavior, Nezu was hardly going to pass up a chance to puzzle Shota out. Shota didn't say any of that. You're safe, he said instead. And Nezu was. He was territorial. He protected what was his, with the animalistic ferocity he'd long convinced the world he did not have, and the intelligence he'd long convinced the heroes was his most dangerous trait. UA was his. The students were his. The teachers were also his. Shota was his. Shota heard the glass in his own tone. Heard the shards cut up his words and present them to Nezu as offering. You're safe and I'm going to need help. You'll figure it out anyways. Shota breathed. Shota's breath shook out of his body. This way I won't have to say it. Say what, Aizawa-san? Nezu asked, because he cared, but he always pushed. Deku's dead. Again, the words weren't the ones that Shota had planned on saying. He wasn't sure he'd ever planned on saying those particular words, to be honest, even as they burrowed into his lungs, and scared there, just like the image of one doll destroying Izuku's body, as he gave it for this one. As he gave it up for this one. Impossible chance. Nezu cocked his head. I don't know who that is. Someone you would have liked. The answer poured out of Shota, tearing out of his throat, and bringing great racking sobs as punctuation. He wrapped thin arms around his middle, bending in half, touching his forehead to his knees. He distinctly registered Nezu on the phone, cheerfully announcing to the person on the end, probably Hizashi, that Shota had been working on a case for, and had a breakthrough. that meant he would be absent for the next few days. Shota didn't bother to try and keep quiet. He knew, in the part of his brain that was still coherent, that never stopped because stopping was dangerous, and dangerous meant death. That the acoustics in the corner were designed not to carry. He also knew that he wouldn't succeed, even if he did try. Nezu wouldn't judge regardless. The not rat knew what the aftermath of torture looked like, what it felt like. It took a long time for Shota to be able to concentrate on something other than the rattling in his bones. Enough time apparently for Nezu to have made 3 separate cups of tea and placed them on the table by the chessboard. 2 were cold, while one was just faintly steaming, the scent of jasmine attempting to wrap around Shota and embrace him long enough to breathe. Nezu looked up from his tablet when Shota reached for the steaming cup, humming approvingly and looking deliberately at a quilted blanket lying folded over the chessboard. Shota smiled, or would have if he could get the muscles in his jaw to work properly. Instead he blinked, reached out with a slow hand to grab the blanket and drape its floral diamonds over his lap, idly, distracting himself with the thought of punching everyone who'd ever said Nezu didn't have feelings in his face. In the face. Nezu might sometimes have trouble acting on emotional bases, or on acting on other people's emotions, but Shota currently thought the blanket and tea were pretty fucking great. He hadn't even noticed he'd been cold, but the warmth seeping into his skin was bracing. He actually felt like he might be able to stop shaking at some point in the future, if he was very lucky, and no one touched him. I don't remember earning this kind of trust. Shota heard trust and translated to loyalty, knowing loyalty was what he'd shown. Sure, he trusted Nezu enough to break down in his office, but they both knew Shota was capable of despairing into the depths of the city, or even the school to have his breakdown in peace. Disappearing into the depths of the city, or even the school to have his breakdown in peace. Shota had found a problem, a significant one, and came to Nezu for help in solving it. Shota was territorial too, and possessive. Besides, you have, Shota told his tea. Nezu hummed again, pressing small paws together. How much time do we have before the first trigger point for the future you aim to prevent? And Shota would die for this creature. He would, though he'd really rather avoid that outcome. All told. Deku would be mad at him if he didn't. But Nezu believed Shota, without Shota having to have said a word. And more importantly, he hadn't asked how long. Shota wasn't sure he could bear having to say that. He didn't know that they'd stop counting towards the end. Shota thought back sluggishly, moving past the decay and the rots, and the green, to the days of being a regular teacher. He'd only ever expelled the entirety of his class once, the second year of his career at UA. 7 years. 7 years till he saw his class, his kids. Officially, like hell, he was going to wait that long. Todoroki and Shitsu in particular needed a checkup. And Deku. It had just been Shota and Izuku in the end. I assume you have goals? Several. Excellent. Nezu clapped his paws together and reached for a notebook. Shota's heart hurt. If you tell me the ones I can help you with, we can prioritize our immediate efforts. I'll put it out to the staff that you're using your newly clear schedule to help me out with a few personal projects. I guess some things won't change, Shota snorted, watching ripples from in the tea. You used this year last time around to discover a like for having an underground hero on call. I liked having information that was scarily accurate. Always happy to please. Nezu paused. You'll have to disappear, lose contact for at least a month. I mean, that would be helpful. Finding Shigaraki would be a trick and a half, but Shota had promised. Izuku had been pretty sure the future villain had spent several years on the street before All For One had found him. Izuku had been so sure the child could be saved without the monster whispering in his ear. Shota wasn't as confident, but Izuku's smile could get him to do much more worse than try to save a boy. His teacher instincts already wanted to help. For the trauma, Aizawa-san. You won't be able to explain many of your reactions, particularly if what I've seen today is any indication. An extended stay in captivity would explain much of your behavior. That is, if you don't plan on telling them. I don't. Couldn't ever. How he tells someone society had ended, that his rod had basically stopped, even as he breathed and fought and lost? How did he tell his friends that everything they did was fertile? That it hadn't mattered in the end? That they'd still die in his arms? Shota had survived because his kids had survived. It would never stop fighting as long as any of his kids were alive. Even if each of his kids' death had been worse than a missing limb. Deku had made it to the end, so Shota had as well. Shota extended both his legs for a moment, wondering how long it would take to get used to the lack of a prosthetic. He tilted his head. Fuck. Nezu hummed. We're going to need to talk to All Might. Shota didn't go missing for a month. Partly because dismantling All For One's motherfucking empire took 9 months. Partly because he refused to do that to his friends. He still hadn't seen them in 9 months, but they had conversations. Short ones. Communications. Hisashi was worried sick, which really was a responsible response. Namari was furious. Shota was unaware that her recommendation for joining UA was supposed to help ground him and keep out of some of the more dangerous areas he'd been lurking in before his teaching job. It had even worked the first time around. Only the fact that Nezu had briefed the UA staff on Shota's current placement with All Might current placement with All Might gave Shota some wiggle room and prevented his friends storming the country looking for him, as we threatened to do that at least 3 times. He loved his friends so much. And that was more based on what Shota working with All Might meant about the severity of the situation and the hype of All Might being the number 1 hero. Shota's friends had better taste than that. The Empire wasn't destroyed in those 9 months. Not completely. They were close. They'd reduced All for One to a handful of locations, and avoided the battle that had crippled All Might entirely. Shota felt he could leave the remainder of the battle to All Might and Sir Made, particularly since all that remained were the large-scale takedowns that were much more daylight heroics than the stalking, information monitoring, and sabotage that Shota had been doing so far. That wasn't to say Shota wasn't demanding constant updates, something that All Might himself was surprisingly willing to accommodate. The man was perhaps viewing the updates as a condition to Shota's agreement to go home. All Might had prepared an entire bumbling speech about how they can handle the rest. Eraser had already done so much. They had an inside man. Please go to rest, Shota. Shota probably had a hard time resting. Such genuine care from the former Scarecrow, who'd maybe sort of been his friend once upon a time. The man also wasn't wrong. For all that Shota couldn't tell Yagi, that Shota had burnt out years and futures ago. So he was home. He could go back to school tomorrow. He would go back to UA and walk into the staff room and see his friends. He was not ready. He wanted it more than almost anything, and he was not ready. He didn't flinch when the woman sat next to him, and jolting him out of his thoughts. Though he did close his eyes briefly, he knew this was coming. Really, a grown man cannot sit at a park within sight of the play equipment all by himself, not accept someone to comment. Not with how frequently he'd been here in the last week as he wrapped things up and tried to get ready for school. Shota started to turn, a hand already going to his hero license, and mouth opening to promise he wasn't some creep. His brain skipped, however, at the feel of a cool hand over his and grass green hair, life green eyes meeting his. That's hardly necessary. Erase ahead. I know exactly who you are. Midori Inko gave his hand, the one holding his license, a gentle pat, and withdrew, smiling softly. You've long been one of my son's favorite heroes. Both my son's favorite heroes. Shook, a very small green-haired boy, was laughing while being pushed on the swing base. Midori Izuku looked like he was having the time of his life, babbling away at the older boy, doing the pushing. Shimura Tenko. Midoriya Tenko. The moment the paperwork went through, was snarking at his new brother, but using his glove-carved hands with infinite carefulness to keep the swinging motion going. Swinging motion going. Shota wondered how long it had taken for Izuku to talk to Tenko into touching him with the gloves. Probably not long at all. Tenko recognized you the first time you sat down, which involved a lot of staring, which tipped Izuku off. The only reason you didn't get mobbed by curious and grateful children is Tenko is convinced you're on a mission and refuses to let himself or his baby brother get in your way. Ah, was all Shota found himself able to say for a long moment. You disagree? Inko hummed, watching the children with Shota, instead of looking at the man beside her. I think you're mourning. Breath froze in Shota's lungs, and he felt his muscles look up in a faulty fight or fight response. Faulty flight or fight response. I've lost all my family except for my boys, in one way or another, Inko continued softly. The library work at a library is a street away from the hospital. I know what grief looks like years ahead. Moving forward slightly, still not looking at him. You saved my son. You saved Tenko from the streets, and from the people who would never see him as more than a villain. You saved him from himself. He remembers you, and your words, and your challenge to be better than the heroes who ignored him. To be the hero for the next kid like him. Shota wanted to close his eyes. Wanted to run away, but he couldn't bring himself to move. He hadn't done much of anything. Sure, he'd found Tenko, dirty and angry, and tucked into the shadows of an alleyway that was perfect for the murder scene of a big action movie. Sure, he'd talked to the kid, as he'd fed him a couple of meals, earning at least a little trust before dumping him into the system. Sure, he made sure that people in the system Tenko had met had been Tsukachi or a therapist, and a court counselor, vetted by future knowledge and Nezu both, and Midoriya Inko herself. But that was it. Shota had fled afterwards, had refused to interact with the face that was so different, yet so familiar to the one who'd been responsible for the deaths of many of Shota's students, his kids, his family. He'd watched, though he sat on many of the park benches and watched as baby Izuku, baby Deku, had cuddled and hugged and babbled. The confusion and hostility out of his new big brother. His new big brother, with a super cool quirk, who understood what it meant to be ostracized by society, to be victim to casual cruelty. Shota had watched and forgiven. How could he not when he saw Tenko's spine go from the hunched breast that shuddered rage and fear and hurt to delicate steel that formed the backbone and a near feral desire to protect this one good thing. How could he not, when that one good thing was Izuku? Not Shota's Izuku, but Izuku. How could Shota not when that was the same expression that he'd seen in the fucking mirror the last time he'd been able to bring himself to look? You brought me my son, a piece I didn't even know was missing from my family. She faltered for the first time since she said that. I was considering I wasn't sure I was going to take in any more fosters. Not after how the last one treated Izuku. Not after how easily their justified hurt and anger found an outlet in my son. And how sad he was when not even his foster sibling wanted to be his friend. She shook her head. I know grief, Eraserhead. I know grief-stricken exhaustion. You saved my son, both of them, by giving them each other. I'm more than happy to listen if you want. Shota didn't turn to face her. He didn't imagine he would be able to hold up against any version of the Midoriya eyes. Will you tell me about your child? It's not that simple. He wasn't mine. The words caught in his throat. Which Shota figured was fine since he hadn't meant to say anything. Anyways, he tipped forward and let his hair cover his face. Inko hemmed again. Like the opening bars to a symphony. I imagine it is often very complicated with heroics, and the quirks and motivations you must be exposed to. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching baby Izuku take a leap off the swing and tumble to the ground, laughing. Tako ran to pick him up, immediately falling to pray baby Izuku. Baby Izuku's octopus arms. Shota thought about telling Inko about his Izuku, about his son, because it was complicated. But Izuku hadn't called Shota anything besides Zazawa in the end. Thought about telling her son his son was quirkless, because for all the power of One for All, Izuku had always felt quirkless. Thought about telling her his son was a hero, because Izuku had always been a hero. He thought about telling all the things he would never tell her. The nights holding each other after finding another classmate gone, the injuries patched up with an ever-dwindling first aid kit. The look on Izuku's face when he figured out he could give up for one shot at something as ridiculous as time travel. He liked green, Shota said, voice layered with blood and ghosts and lodges. He liked green and young, and had a sweet tooth, much larger than he let on. He was smart and brave and so kind. I miss him. He missed his dad, his Sadzawa. He was never supposed to do this alone. He wasn't. He couldn't. Except he would. He had to. A chance for his dad, and his friends, and his mom, and all of the 100,000 civilians to live without ever knowing the horrors of All for One. He'd do it. He returned to the past in the same location as the one where he'd left the future. Deep in one for all, and all for one's layers. There had been fire, an explosion, and several dead. He'd taken advantage of the chaos, started yelling at the persons after stealing a white coat and ID from someone who wouldn't be getting up again. He didn't feel badly about it, not really. He recognized the name. had done extensive research on the man as part of the failed efforts to bring down all folk in the future. Not only could he fake the deceased intelligence clerk with relative ease, but the world was much better off without the particular brand of cruelty. Izuku had cleaned up the mess, let himself be shuffled to the medical, and allowed his extensive injuries to be played off as being due to the incident. He'd have to hack into some of the records later to sift some things around, but he could do that. He could pretend to be a monster. He certainly no longer felt like a hero. He stood in the room of the man whose identity he'd stolen. He stood and shook from the explosion, shook from the time travel, shook from the loss of Windfall, shook from the pain, shook from the sheer utter loneliness of losing the only person he had left, shook from the image of his Dazzala, trying to face hundreds of low-level villains in a mockery of that first day at the USJ, blood in his teeth and ghosts in his bones. He brought Izuku time to reach the equipment and sacrifice his wild quirk for one last shattered chance. Izuku shook as he closed his eyes for a nap, with parted dreams already wrapping around his bones as awareness faded away. That was chapter 1. Chapter 2 will be whenever I have time to post. Also, a little bit of an update. So, sorry for any of the mistakes in reading. I do need to get to bed, so this is like what's gonna be posted, I guess. Yeah. Also, I do have a job, so I do tend to work a lot, and I only get 2 days off because because I just chose to work every day except 2 days. But yeah, videos are gonna come out a lot more late and slow, and yeah. Anyways, I'm still doing the Prove Them Wrong series. I just thought I'd give you this 2 series to listen to while I take a while to end up posting some. But yeah. Anyways, this is family regardless of blood or time. So I do hope you guys enjoy this short series. There are only 4 chapters to this, so it won't take that long to finish this one. But anyways, yeah. I guess have a good night or day wherever you're at, and bye.